Welcome back to another Epidose of these crazy people that just keep eating meat and can't stop talking about it. Today, Justin and I are taking on this graphic that Justin dug up. It floats around the interwebs, and we decided that we need to address it because we feel there's a lot of misinformation here. This is the kind of stuff that easily alters people's thinking in a less than positive way, and so we thought we better address it. What was your initial sort of impression when you saw it, Justin?
Well, when I was more plant-based, this kind of stuff actually got me. Like it really did. Like I really did think that the silliest one is the teeth, I think. You know what I mean? It's like, oh, we do have more molars than we do canines. They don't stick out like a vampire or like a tiger or anything. So like on the surface, you could be like, oh damn, maybe we are like, herbivores. Um, and maybe we are supposed to eat just like fruit, vegetables, nuts, the plant-based stuff, and so yeah, graphic very similar to this. I don't think it was this exact one. you know Pull this in front of me 4 or 5 years ago and it would have been like, damn, like that's got me, because I'm a stupid 20-year-old and my girlfriend's vegan, so yes, it must be right.
Yeah, no, I mean, it's true. 4 or 5 years ago, I would have found some of this compelling, and I may not have had a reason to really look into it. I may have just accepted it because it went in
Right.
line with all the other propaganda that we hear, right?
Right, exactly. It's like, oh, yay, it just lines up. It's just the worst kind of confirmation bias, basically. Because, everyone starts out eating some plants, essentially, for the most
Right.
part, and so you're just told that eating plants is good for you. So you're already on there. And then you see a graph like this and be like, oh, okay. So there's like real science behind it. So humans are more herbivores, and yeah, we can eat meat, but it's not actually best for us, and we're not like designed to eat it necessarily, which is why we have to use like a fork and knife. You can run that narrative in your head pretty easily.
Right. I agree. Yeah. So a couple things about the graphic. We're not sure what the original origin of it is. This is the kind of thing that floats around social media, gets passed on and passed on and passed on. So we don't know where it comes from. We don't know who made it or what sort of credibility they claimed or anything. And then the other thing about it is not real high res, so I'm not sure if people can really read it. So what I did is I took line by line everything they listed under human, and I typed it up so it should be easier for people to read. And then also I could put it in the show notes so that people can see clearly what it says. And then we Justin and I'll go line by line and discuss the features that they point out. So they apparently, whoever did this believes we're supposed to eat fruits, vegetables, and nuts, right? So that puts us clearly in the realm of, shall we say, herbivores. Yeah. So we're gonna mash on this a little bit, right?
Right.
Let me pull up that other document, and we shall get to it. So I think should be able to read this quite clear. Let me know if you can read this. All right, I'm pulling it up.
All right.
So you should be able to see it soon.
Yeah, I can see it.
Yeah, is it legible?
Yes, maybe blow it up a
See if we can.
tad, Control Plus or something. Probably have to scroll around, but there we go. Now I can read it very well. It's
All
probably
right,
very good for the children at home.
excellent. So we'll start with the first line. Of course, is what we already discussed. It just says fruits. Food is fruits, vegetables, and nuts for humans. It doesn't really say why. So, and of course, we've heard this before. But of course, Justin and I just eat meat. So we're going to say, no, we think this is false, right? Right off the
Right.
get go. So now we'll get into a little bit more into the anatomy and the reasons why. So it just says prehensile hands. And prehensile, if you look it up, just says chiefly of animal limbs or tail capable of grasping. That's that's the definition of prehensile. So
See, and that's totally deliberate to use a big word like that. That's out of favor. You know, no, I've never walked into daily life and someone said prehensile to me, like ever. I don't think
right,
even in like bio class or anything. So, you know, it's these little like mind tricks, of course, you know, because you're going to read that and you don't want to look like an idiot and have to look something like that up. So you're like, oh
right.
yeah, oh, and you can kind of figure it out. But, you know, you're not going to like dive deep into that because you don't want to be embarrassed.
Yeah. And I thought one of the things that was interesting and almost deceptive about it is that um, the human hand has gone through a drastic evolution. And I don't even I have to find the article. I actually have to pull it up from that Telegram thread. But anyways, the human hand has actually evolved to grasp things, and of course, what we're known for is tools. And the first thing about archaeology is you find out that we left tools everywhere, right? And so you see these little Facebook groups in like Iowa, people are pulling up spearheads, knives, you know, arrowheads, and all kinds of other stuff. Like the average person just goes out looking and finds this stuff everywhere, right? So
Even
this really,
without looking, that's how we first started to learn to look for them, is people were finding them without looking.
yeah, they're literally everywhere. So you know that's the thing. The human hand was able to do things like shape tools. So the other primates, some of the other primates actually do use hammerstones. So they'll use a rock to smash open like nuts and stuff like that. But you know, when you use a hammerstone, particularly against another stone, you get sharp flakes that often come off. And humans were using those sharp flakes to cut things a long time ago, and none of the other primates do that. So you could have chimps or whatever sitting there with hammerstones, open nuts, and there's sharp pieces of rock everywhere, and they never pick them up and cut anything with it, much less prepare their food, which we've been doing. You know, arguably our ancestors were doing 3.8 million, 3.7 million years ago, because we have fossils with the slice marks on the bones of animals where somebody clearly was cutting the muscle tissue away millions of years ago, right? And so I think they kind of shortchanged us by not really getting into that um, when it comes to just shortening their sort of explanation of us having prehensile hands, right? So here's that article. Actually, let me share this real quick. This article, I'll put the links in, but it's it's just barely touching on the human hand and the evolution, right? And one of the things we clearly did is we smashed open bones and ate the marrow. We smashed open brain casings and ate the brains of other animals. We may well have just started out as a species that was more scavenger of meat than a hunter of meat. Um, so we know that we were opening brain casings and eating the brains and the bone marrow and stuff like that. And a lot of animals don't do that. So really, it said, you know, that just hyenas and humans open the brain casing. And even then, a lot of you know, if you go out and you see a fresh kill, a lot of times you can find intact femurs from animals, and sometimes entire legs, because like some animals, they go for the viscera or the guts first, and they'll, once they're full, they'll leave behind, you know, leg muscle and stuff like that. So there's plenty of opportunity for us to eat bone marrow, leg muscle, brain tissue, and so on and so forth. So yeah, I think they shortchange us on the hands. I mean, our hands evolved from climbing tools like most primates, to hands that make tools, throw spears, and stuff like that, overflaking flint and all that jazz. So, do you have anything else to add to that one?
Um, just that, our ancestors, maybe they're right about the organs, and maybe it was mostly eating eating brains in the early days.
Yeah, I mean that could easily lead to us having bigger brains, right? You're just
Right.
feeding the material you need to build bigger brains.
Right. No, I think that's good. There's a lot more separation between us and apes, monkeys, and stuff. And obviously, tigers, bears don't have hands; they have claws and paws, which I'm sure we'll talk about here in a
We
second.
we got them opposable
Right.
thumbs.
We got the opposable thumb. That's right.
So number 3 on that list was walks upright. So it doesn't really say much about, why they mention that, but if you're familiar with evolutionary theory, you've probably heard that one of the theories is that we learned to walk upright because as the forests in Central Africa or wherever receded, there was more savanna, grassland type stuff, and we evolved to walk upright so we could look over the grass and find something to eat. Probably an animal, right? Because then once you have grassland, savanna, you get a lot more like horses and cattle and animals like that. So that's one theory. And then the other theory is the aquatic ape theory. So the aquatic ape theory really gets into the fact that we lost most of our body hair. We could hold our breath underwater. And if you watch other primates, they will wade out in the water and they're able to walk on two legs once they get out in the water. And then they spend most of the time on land walking on all fours. So we clearly have been eating things like fish and shellfish and crabs and stuff for millions of years because we left the trash piles behind. And of course, the nitrogen isotopes and stuff like that show that we were eating them. So it could be that wading out in the water was the thing that helped us evolve to walk upright. So our hips are different. Our shoulders are different. Our eyes are different. Our brains are different. Our hands are different. So yeah, so this is one of the reasons why that list doesn't really help us. We can also hold our breath at will. So the other primates can't do that. That's why you can't teach a gorilla to speak, is because they can't enunciate like we can because we have fine breath control. So we can hold our breath and go underwater and get fish or collect mussels or clams or oysters or whatever, crabs and lobsters if you want, octopus and all the other stuff that we can eat from the sea. I suppose if you really wanted to, you could eat some seaweed. So, anyways, that's another possibility. I mean, people talked about the fact that our sclera or the whites of our eyes are white because that helped us communicate as cooperative hunters. So, like, we can tell where we're looking and stuff. When you look at the other primates, the sclera tends to be dark. The whole eye tends to be relatively close in color, and it's much harder to tell exactly where they're looking, which is probably a survival tool that evolved that we evolved away from. So it's entirely possible that a lot of our origins were more aquatic than we thought, and most populations live relatively close to the coast or bodies of water. So and they have.
And we're born swimming. You know, we
Yeah,
can.
you can birth a baby in the water, right? And the baby comes out and like, wow, look, he knows to hold his breath, and there you go. So,
Right.
anyways, this is apparently not true of other primates, and a good argument. Of course, body hair, and then if you look at how a proficient swimmer jumps into the water, human beings are able to assume a relatively hydrodynamic form. So, I don't know. And some people make the argument too that like our feet are more the toes of our feet are more webbed than other primates, which if you look at foot comparisons, it does appear to be the case. And then if you know Bart K really well, you find out that people like him have even more webbing between their toes in a sort of disturbing way. But
Well,
Anyway.
and if anyone that's ever stayed too long in the bath or in the swimming pool, you get the pruniness, right? Which is actually supposed to add more friction so you can grip in water
Hmm,
easier.
that's interesting. I didn't know that.
You know that? Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, it adds friction and grip so that we could, so that spear hunting, right? So we could better hold like a spear
Hmm.
in water, swim around and hunt or whatever else, or even grabbing onto a fish or grabbing onto, because it doesn't really make any sense that we could actually hold onto ocean creatures. And they don't, yeah, they're kind of slippery, but as long as you got a good grip, we can actually hold on to, you know, ocean creatures, which is kind of crazy if you think about it. Kind of shouldn't be able to unless, like you said, we spend all this time near and in water.
Right. Interesting. So, the next one is mouth opening small. And, I mean, humans don't often kill with their mouths, right? But that we have.
Should we show like the other animals just so that they know like what we're comparing to? You know what I mean? So
Can you see the mouths of the other animals?
yeah. So their argument is that the reason why we're not carnivore or why the mouth um, makes sense to them is because the mouth opening is large. So, you know, the tiger, I believe that's a tiger that they have there.
Yeah, it looks like
Um,
a tiger of some kind.
maybe a cheetah.
Maybe a cheetah.
Yeah. And then next to it, the omnivore is a bear, also has a large opening. Um, Herbivore small. I don't really see that donkey as having a small mouth opening though. I mean,
Right.
horses' mouths open pretty wide.
Yeah, and look at the chimp. It's not exactly
Right.
small.
Right.
But I mean, even back to the bear, they got bear down as meat and vegetables. What vegetables does a freaking bear eat? You know, I mean, bears will eat berries, which I always thought was a fruit, but of course they can only eat that seasonally. And in theory, bears will eat honey, but I don't really know. I mean, I've never seen bears foraging for vegetables. I'd like to know what vegetables there are. As the guy was going on in that one group about, people digging for tubers, but I think they don't realize how rare. I mean, first of all, before we had fire, we couldn't cook. We couldn't, we couldn't process things. All wild potatoes are toxic, right? So how do we detoxify them? Like most tubers are toxic. We can't cook them. How do we process them, right? And we were eating meat clearly long before we used fire, right? There's no evidence for humans using fire. We were eating meat. We weren't processing vegetables or tubers. So I don't know. Bears eat a lot of meat. They eat all the meat they can get. So I kind of, while bears are kind of omnivorous to some degree, they will eat a bunch of moss and stuff when they're getting ready to hibernate to kind of slow down their digestive tract, stuff like that. But
The
it's
bulky
kind of weird.
fiber.
Bulky fiber, indigestible fiber, right?
Yeah.
And then again, you pointed out that, like horses and donkeys, they can open their mouth a lot. It's like even a cow, they have a great big jaws, and all they do is munch on grass. I mean, in nature, right? Yeah. So I'm not really sure that they did themselves much of a service by putting that on the list.
Right. Yeah. Well, the whole thing is just kind of silly once you break it
Yeah.
down.
And of course, we cut up our food. Like I said, 3.8 million years ago, our ancestors were already whacking meat off the bone and eating it. And if you ever seen the videos of the Eskimos or the Inuits, they'll have a fish or something and they just cut it into pieces that big enough to get in their mouth, and they chew it up and swallow it. And even meat that's really tough to chew, they just swallow it because you digest it anyways, right?
Right. Yeah. Our process begins more in the stomach than in the mouth, nor do we hunt with our mouths. We
Yeah.
simply eat it. And, if we started out as scavengers, we probably were eating smaller portions or what we could get, and then starting to cut, but it was probably just ripping, probably very, very, very primitive, very, very, very early, just ripping chunks of flesh and meat off and shoving it into our mouths. So
Yeah. Some nice tender mammoth.
we do have some fingernail. I mean, we could have dug in there just a little bit.
I suppose if you didn't trim your nails, they might be kind of wicked. All right. So the next one is back in the mouth, rudimentary blunt canines. And, Justin doesn't eat a lot of raw meat, but I do. And a lot of our friends do. And we don't have any trouble chewing meat. So, I mean, yeah, humans aren't known for doing a lot of killing with their mouths, but we seem to be able to chew raw meat or cooked meat just fine.
And
So
Mike Tyson during that fight, he was able to bite off that dude's ear.
wasn't that
Worked.
Evander Holyfield?
Oh yeah, Vander
I think that's who it
Holyfield.
was.
Yeah.
That's a good point.
So it's not like it's impossible, but it can do it.
Big flattened incisors works fine for eating raw meat. That was my answer. So yeah, I chew raw meat really well all the time. And sure, some pieces of steak are a lot tougher than others, right? But like liver, it's not really that tough.
No, not at all.
Most of us, when we eat it, we just cut it up in pieces and eat it anyways. So
Heart raw is easy to get down. It's a little more muscular, but you can totally just munch down on it.
yeah,
Again,
heart's on the tough side, but we can still just eat it, right?
right. Yeah. And again, we are, you're not taking an entire heart and stuffing it down your mouth. We're still, even when you eat raw, you're still using a knife and fork. It's still cut up,
Now, flattened molars, yeah, we have molars, but if you look at the molars of an herbivore versus a human or even something like a pig, they're completely different, right?
Yeah.
So
We have indentation, right? And ours has like kind of formations, whereas theirs are like straight flat, if I
right,
remember correctly. Yeah.
right. Now this one was
Which is also why we get cavities. If it was, well, one of the reasons, but if it was just straight flat, toothbrushes would be designed, differently because you wouldn't need it going in all these different angles and stuff like that. It would
right,
literally just be one flat brush. Like if you ever brushed a dog's teeth or a horse's teeth, the brush it's just flat. There's no like indentations and all this, not that shape, to get in the crevice.
right. So upper jaw sits on the bottom, which didn't really make any sense to me.
It doesn't. It's like, isn't that how all creations jaws are?
And then it says great lateral and forward mobility. I don't know. I don't know what that's about. So, anyways, doesn't really
And
make
what's it
any
say
sense.
for the carnivores again? Why are their mouths different? Let's see. Lower jaw embedded inside of the top, no lateral or forward mobility. I mean, I guess we have a little bit compared to, yeah, like a cheetah or a tiger, I guess, but it's not nothing to write home about.
Right. All
Well, it's
right.
saying but the herbivores have great lateral and forward mobility, which I'm not even sure if that's true. Like a horse, do they move their jaws up, like the bottom up forward?
I don't think horses have that side to side grinding motion like cows do, but they
Right.
have a different digestive tract. So yeah, it's tough to make sense of this. I mean, and in the end, none of this says anything about us being herbivores, really, because as we know, we eat meat really well. So, and then it says no shear, chew their food. Yeah, we chew our food, but my dog chews her food too. So I don't, I don't know. My dog just eats meat and she chews her. I mean, she will wolf it down when she's hungry, just gulp, gulp, gulp. But so does Justin. So
Right. Yeah. I kind of eat more like a duck.
there you go.
Yeah.
Yeah, and I mean, when I go to town on a rack of ribs, I just strip that meat off between the bones and it goes down the hatch, right? I spit the bones
If it's
out.
cooked right, if it could
That's
fall
right.
off the bone.
But even raw meat, I mean, you can just swallow it. I've just swallowed, because that's, like I said, when you get to uh, a piece of meat you can't really chew, it's too tough, maybe it's gristle or connective tissue or whatever, you just swallow it and you digest it, right? So big salivary glands, yes, we do, and we also our saliva is full of all kinds of enzymes that breaks down our food, including meat. That's the first step. Some chewing, work those enzymes in, goes down into your stomach. Your stomach is very acidic. We'll get to that later. And then it goes into the small intestine, and it's almost all meat's almost completely absorbed there. And then it makes this comment about alkaline saliva. And I put, yeah, it works with our digestive enzymes. So you don't necessarily have to have acidic saliva to break down meat, right? We have our stomach is more acidic than a tiger's. So,
Right, but I guess according to this, a tiger saliva is more acidic than ours because it
right.
says strong hydraulic acid for, I guess, the saliva. I think. Oh no, I think I moved ahead. Sorry.
Yeah.
This
So
thing's hard to read.
our saliva, I looked it up and I have links. Our saliva goes from slightly acidic to slightly alkaline, right? But our stomachs are super acidic.
Right.
So, and then they make the point of alkaline urine, which I don't know how they draw a straight line between being a herbivore and having acidic instead of alkaline urine. I don't know. No, there's no explanation for that. I looked it up and couldn't find anything that supported anything to do with that. So, does not secrete uricase. So uricase is an enzyme for breaking down uric acid, right? And of course, but we're also one of two animals that doesn't produce vitamin C, because uric acid is our primary antioxidant. So we have a very different system from most of the other animals, and that's why we don't produce vitamin C. And then we get a tiny bit of it from the meat, and that's all we seem to need, because when we just eat meat and we go to the doctor and they check our vitamin C levels, they're normal. And how is that, even though we don't eat fruits and vegetables, much less, spinach, oranges, and lemon juice and limes and all that other stuff? So yeah, how is that, everybody? And why the comment about uricase and not really explaining it? Now, this number 14 is just flat out false. Anybody could look it up. It says weak hydrochloric acid. I assume they're talking about the stomach. They don't really specify. And actually, humans have very strong uh, hydrochloric acid in their stomach. It's 1.5 to 3.5 is considered normal. And maybe people don't understand the pH scale, because a low pH number indicates high acidity, right? Maybe that's the issue. I don't know, but anybody can look it up. 1.5 is enough to dissolve a metal coin. So, like, if you swallowed a dime or something and it stayed in your stomach, it would dissolve. That's how powerful the acid is.
I'm gonna do it right now. Just kidding. Don't don't do that at home, kids. Yeah, I mean, to me, the stomach is one of the ones that's just like crazy true. Like, why would our stomachs be so acidic if it wasn't for digesting meat? Because we're not eating metal, we're not eating
Right.
wood,
Right.
not eating rocks.
We have a pH on par with other scavengers, so that kind of hints at a scavenger pass, but it also allows us to eat meat with more bacteria in it than, so humans typically could tolerate more bacteria in their meat than like a dog can. So it's not till you get to things like vultures and maybe hyenas or something that you see the really intense acidic stomach like we have. And that is a very evolutionary, that's a very expensive adaptation, because the stomach has to secrete a lot of mucus to protect itself from its own acid. So that in itself is considered evolutionary expensive. So we didn't adapt that way by accident, right? Just like not producing vitamin C It's one of those things where the both sets of genes for that were eliminated in humans. So it wasn't a fluke. It's
Which is why ulcers are so damn painful. Anyone you ever talk to that had an ulcer, a tear in the stomach lining, they have a really, really hard time.
right.
There's some
So
inflammation.
number 16, metabolize small amounts of cholesterol and vitamin A. Yeah, well, guess what? We get plenty of vitamin A when we eat meat, and because it's a fat soluble vitamin, and we make plenty of cholesterol. In fact, if you're a fan of keto, you might know that when you're in a state of ketosis, you're not making cholesterol, and when you come out of ketosis, then your body starts making cholesterol again. So we don't necessarily have to absorb a lot of cholesterol, and that's why when people change their diet, tends to affect their cholesterol levels a little bit, but not a lot. And then they got this bright idea that everybody need to be on statins because they just don't understand cholesterol. And why this is some sort of argument that we're vegetarians or supposed to eat nuts and fruits and vegetables.
Herbivores.
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 Yeah, we like Bart to know, so we're pronouncing the H even though we're Americans. So, and then sweat glands. Again, I'm not really sure because
Oh, just one more thing on cholesterol
yeah,
before we move on.
yeah,
So there's a great study on cholesterol. The only one that's really been done that's actually particularly valid shows higher cholesterol, less mortality, low cholesterol, you get problems, and lower
right.
mortality.
So
And
good point.
so, yeah. And so you want your cholesterol to actually be a little bit over 200, it seems.
Yeah. If your
Um,
cholesterol's low, then you're more likely to die of things in general, including and especially infections.
and it's
So
a very important hormone and anti-inflammatory throughout the body.
very good point. That's true. Yeah. Testosterone, progesterone, estrogen, all that are made from cholesterol. Vitamin D, which, if you're really into it, you've probably already heard that vitamin D is really a hormone. It's made in your skin when you're exposed to sunlight. Very important. So yeah, good point to bring up. Sweat glands. We have sweat glands in our whole body. Yeah, I'm not sure what that has to do with being a herbivore, but that also makes us a fantastic uh, persistent hunter. So, if you're into this kind of stuff, you'll know that there's a race. I believe it started in Scotland where men race against horses on a long foot race. And if it's cold out, the horses win. If it's warm out, the men win. And it's just a great sort of example of how we adapted for persistent hunting. Because as much as we all love horses, we used to eat them just like dogs. We all love our pet dogs, but we used to eat wolves. And this is one of the reasons. Even a cheetah is the fastest mammal on earth, and it can only run for short distances, and then it starts to overheat, and it can only really dissipate heat through its paws. It's like this really weird system. Whereas human beings, we could sweat and sweat and sweat and sweat and sweat. And as long as we can keep sweating, we can stay cool in environments. In fact, we have a very broad temperature range where we can flourish at. Most animals can't adapt to the broad temperature, much less terrain that we can adapt to. So I'm not sure why they put it in here, but it was fun talking about it. So the next one is intestine 9 times body length. Well, what do we know about that, Justin?
Well, so when you talk about intestines, you're mainly talking about enzymes and bacteria. It's not exactly about, and herbivores themselves, it's a fermentation process. They're not actually directly absorbing the plant material. It's long and it moves slowly through their intestines, sometimes multiple chambers, for different sets of chemical processes, enzymes, and bacteria to all break down and get a share. or herbivores operate more like a distillery rather than, like a straight mouth to energy mechanism like carnivores and like we do. We do some of that very much in the beginning, but um, as you move through, the rest of it is, again, like you have here, about absorbing water and sodium, you know, in the lower bowel.
Right. And, in all honesty, most of the nutrition we get is absorbed in the small intestine and, not in the colon or the large intestine. So you say it's 9 times as long as the body. Well, guess what? A large amount of that intestine is not used for absorbing nutrition, which is very different from a lot of other animals, right? Just like you pointed out, like ruminants and stuff like that. uh Chimpanzees and gorillas, they do a lot of fermenting. We don't. We can ferment a little on our colon, but that mostly just produces a lot of farts and not a lot of nutrition. So yeah, so this whole argument about the length of the intestines really kind of falls apart. Just like, we're one of those animals that doesn't make vitamin C, and we use uric acid as our primary antioxidant. Other animals don't. We have hands that make tools, other animals don't. We can swim underwater, they can't. you know so there's a lot of
Yeah.
things to compare here. Yep.
And herbivores, especially like, compares to apes and monkeys and stuff like that, they have to sit there and eat all damn day because they're just constantly having to ferment. I mean, a 400-pound gorilla spends what, like 90% of its day eating,
I think
basically
it's
just like
somewhere between,
leaves.
like, for the gorillas and the chimps that eat a lot of branches and leaves, it's like 60 to 80% of their time is just spent eating those things, because they're used to eating something that has very little nutrition in it, and that's why they also eat each other.
Right, which is another point about the graph I wanted to bring up. But another point is that it's theorized that we gave up some of our stomach, some of this fermentation, our ability to ferment, for brain power. The fat and the meat was just so much quicker way of getting nutrients that at some point, we don't exactly know how this happened, but at
Right.
some point there was a switch where we probably generally probably did have an even longer small intestine and an even longer large intestine to break down more fruits, vegetables, and nuts. But at some point, we lost it, and for the ability to grow our brain and to absorb the nutrition in meat and fat.
Right. Very well stated. Now the next one, colon long, so succulated acid. I don't know what they were getting at there. So that's, again, when we talk about the colon, we're talking about the large intestine, or the large bowel. You know, not a lot goes in there, like, other than what Justin said. You reabsorb water and sodium and stuff like that. We get very almost no nutrition from our colon. Some people say that you can ferment certain types of starches, and then we get fatty acids from that. But uh, from what I understand, we get very, very little nutrition from our colons. It's basically there to suck the water back out, so we don't get dehydrated. So, anyways, that's
I
also.
guess I guess the reason, because the herbivore's colon is long, it has complex acids, I guess. But again, that's to break down there's you're having a bunch of different processes there in the herbivores, and then so I guess that's what they're trying to say. I
Yeah,
don't.
it's tough to interpret.
Right. I don't know. Have you looked up the pH of the colon? I'm sure that information's out there somewhere.
Yeah, no, I didn't. I was trying to figure out what was significant about succulated acid. It's like, I don't know what that means. So,
Right.
anyways, I figured we'll probably revisit that another time. Maybe we'll do short ribs on this one where we
On the
condense it.
human digestive system,
Yeah.
the short ribs.
Now the number 20 here does not metabolize cellulose. I'm not really sure how that was in favor of their argument that we're supposed to eat fruits, nuts, and vegetables. But it goes back to what we said. Yeah, our colons don't digest cellulose, and neither does our small intestine or our stomach. So I'm not sure what their point was, because it seems to bolster our point. We don't get any nutrition from cellulose. Most fiber is insoluble or indigestible. And in fact, a lot of the nutrients in plants are trapped in the cellulose along with a lot of water, and you wind up just pooping it out. So aside from that, a lot of people who have intestinal problems, it's in the large intestine or the colon. So that's where people tend to get diverticulosis. People suffer from things like Crohn's disease and stuff like that. It's usually in the colon, and it seems to be that cellulose irritates your bowels. And so in fact, did I miss the one where it said,
Yeah, yeah, you did. I was going to bring that up right now. So
yeah.
one of the points they say for the herbivores is requires fiber to stimulate peristalsis, which for those that don't know what peristalsis is, it's basically just a fancy way of saying moving food through the digestive tract, essentially. So your digestion does contract. It does, that's why you sometimes get that gurgle sound. It's your intestines, your small intestine contracting, basically. And here it says that you need fiber to stimulate peristalsis, which is really funny because it's sorry, it's basically active at all times. Essentially, you're the only reason that your stomach would stop is you're in danger. And so the body's rushing nutrients and blood to your arms and legs to fight off a predator or to go hunting, would slow down the digestive process. But other than that, your digestion's, stuff, it's always, gurgling and always contracting and things like that.
Yeah, so there's lots of us that don't eat fiber, and our bowels work better than ever, right? And it's not a new thing. There's people who live in parts of the world where there isn't really any edible fiber, and this is something that communities have lived without fiber and have good bowel health, long lives, and they're healthy and happy without any fiber or cellulose at all, right? We did not evolve to eat psyllium husk, right? So
Yeah, we would have died out, 2 million years ago. Had that been the case, how would we have ever digested food?
yeah, so this is flat out false. You don't need fiber for peristalsis. It happens anyways. And in fact, it happens with less effort. The studies that people have chronic idiopathic constipation and they give them more fiber, it's only like 24% found any benefit, and most people found that it made it worse. So this whole idea that you've got to have all this fiber, well, you just eat a bunch of psyllium husk and it just irritates your bowels, but it also adds bulk to your stool, and then it can kind of make your stool firmer or less flexible. So in a lot of ways, it can create more problems. And there's books like The Fiber Menace that explain all this.
So if you want to break your toilet, eat all that fiber. There you
Right?
go.
So fiber can rob you of water and nutrients. It comes packaged with a bunch of anti-nutrients, including natural pesticides that the plants generate just to keep creatures like us from eating them. Now, this last one, complete digestion, 12 to 18 hours. And it's like, okay, so when you compare us to other animals, our digestion is fairly quick, but this number isn't necessarily even accurate, because if we looked at how long it takes for us to digest meat, it's like a day to 2 days. But when we do digest meat, it happens in the small intestine, not the colon or the large intestine. And we tend to absorb everything out of the meat, unlike plants, which we tend not to absorb much out of. So,
And that's kind of where the rumor is that, oh, meat just sits there forever and goes rotting in your small intestine, right?
yeah, and if you ask, gastroenterologists or proctologists or whatever about this, they'll tell you, no, I never see calcified. chuck roast in anybody's colon. So yeah, the chuck roast should never make it to the colon. You know, if you got chuck roast making it to your colon, then that means, like, you know, you're not secreting any bile, you don't have any enzymes, you know, your stomach acid's shot, and you're probably at that point you probably should have died a long time ago. So yeah, it's just a you know, they call it a wives' tale, or you could call it bro science or whatever. You know, it's just false information, but it's the kind of stuff we hear as kids and we think it's real. And that's one of
Right.
the reasons why the graphics like this are so easy to believe. Is like we hear all these little weird explanations of, you know, meat not digesting or it's rotting in your stomach, or, you know, and it's like, well, you know, the enzymatic action of all the bacteria in your small intestine, you know, you could call that rotting if you wanted to, but the truth is it's just organisms breaking down the fat and the protein and passing it through the thin cellular layer into the bloodstream, and that's where we get our nutrients.
Right. And so I always like to talk about how you need to get away from the idea that you're feeding yourself, because in a way you're not. You're feeding many millions of organisms and cells throughout your body. So you have
Yeah,
to, so everything we eat has to be broken down to that cellular level, you know? And so, yeah, when you take a pill or a vitamin or eat a plant, you're sending that to the cells and to that bacteria, you know?
right.
It's way more of a complex process than people than we're taught, you know, and we don't even fully understand it. Like the microbiome debate, you know, that's still up in the air. We don't. I mean, we know a few things, but we don't really know what a healthy microbiome is. We can't identify one species of bacteria versus another. We do know that if you go and eat a bunch of plants, you can flourish plant, you know, digesting bacteria that like that stuff, but that also opens you up to like candida and other bad bacteria and other things as well. And then when you start eating more carnivore, that seems to flourish a whole other set of bacteria. And then some have even reported that, oh, you have even more, you know, stomach bacteria there. It's like healthy microbiome and all that stuff. So
Yeah,
microbiome thing is a
a
whole,
lot of this stuff comes from associative studies. So they're like, oh, this particular organism is associated with this and with that. And so then people get this idea of like, oh, I need this probiotic or I need that active culture or whatever. And the truth is, as a whole, we don't know exactly what the human digestive biome was supposed to look like. And then, of course, we hear about SIBO and stuff all the time where the stuff that's living in the colon or the large intestine winds up creeping up into the small intestine and making you really sick because it doesn't belong there. But that's exactly what happens when you're on a high carb diet and you eat all this garbage.
yeah,
And
exactly. And
and
then just one more thing on the graph. Monkeys are omnivorous. Monkeys do not are not herbivores. It looks like a clear monkey. Maybe it's a gorilla, but oh, I mean, they. My understanding is that they all eat meat because they war with each other. Is my understanding. Some level of meat. They don't really hunt.
I'm pretty sure that's the mouth of a chimpanzee right
Mm,
there.
right.
And yeah, chimpanzees eat each other. They eat monkeys.
Bugs, depending on
Yeah,
where
they eat
that
bugs and
falls.
stuff all the time. They and most of the time, you know, which is kind of deceiving because it says fruits, vegetables, and
So
nuts, but chimps spend most of their time munching on leaves, right? And when they can, they eat meat. They're vicious hunters. They're pack hunters. So that's probably where we got that from. But yeah, they eat other species, less weaker species of monkeys out of existence because they're consummate hunters, right? And they're vicious. They just tear them apart and eat them raw. You don't really see much of a canine in there, but if you ever seen these horrific videos of chimpanzees eating a monkey, or if you ever seen the gorilla eating the baby gorilla, it's horrifying. You know, it's just they're still alive and they're just you know, like a bear does, you know, just frightening to watch. So
and about the fruits, they don't eat. They're not picking up fruit and eating the fibrous material. they're oftentimes just sucking fruit juice out of the fruit. They're not just straight,
Yeah,
it's not like a bird that like eats the fruit, you know.
a lot of small monkeys, they do that. They just suck the juice out and they throw the rest of it away. Yeah, they don't put it in their mouth and chew it up. So yeah, I don't know. Some people like to juice. I say no to juicing personally. I'm not living out of a Vitamix, but
Except for blood, we like meat juice.
yeah, we'll eat a little meat, drink a little meat juice from time to time.
Right.
Well, did we put a nail in that coffin or what?
I think so. I think that you know, the A team here, me and Tom, I think we totally destroyed this little graphic. You know, hey, if it's someone that was fooled by it, don't feel bad. I was once fooled by it. I mean, back us up. You know, everyone was a kid or a teenage once, and that's when a lot of people get into being plant-based. You know, is in their teenage years or early adult years. You know, and so you're on social media, you come across the graph, you already have the, oh, I don't want to hurt animals. See something like this, it has a few words and a few things that you don't understand, but you're too insecure to admit that to yourself or anyone else. And so you just like, okay, this sounds scientific. This sounds like it's right. Oh man, then the science does back up, you know, humans are more herbivores. And so I should definitely be living and moving in that direction. You just kind of move down that path until so you bump up into the right YouTube video or our channel or something that, or a friend that happens to go carnivore and they have great results, and then, you know, flips you the other way.
Right. Yeah, for sure. And you know, I don't know who came up with this list, but clearly they ignored a lot of the adaptations that human beings evolved through in order to do something like this. And you know, the short list is our brains, our eyes, our shoulders, our hands, our hips. They all changed, and then of course our digestive tract changed. And the way our digestive tract is nothing like these other animals. It functions entirely different. So
And we can throw.
hell yeah, we can throw. Yeah,
That's
even a really powerful primate, it doesn't matter, gorilla, chimpanzee, bonobo, they can't throw like we can throw, right? They have a different kind of shoulder. Just like their hands, it's designed for climbing and not really for throwing. So monkeys really don't excel at throwing anything but poo. So
that's right.
that's
Yeah.
right.
Well, they're practicing. Maybe they'll work their way up to throwing rocks.
Yeah, so anyways, let's thank everybody for watching. We hope the
Thank
video
you.
was instructional and entertaining. We try to not to be too boring, but we feel like we need to have a voice in countering some of this dogma out there, because our dogma is way better than their dogma. And so we want to thank you for watching. Spread the link around, that really helps. And if you can subscribe, that really helps getting subscribership up. We'd like to get over 2,000 soon. That'd be really helpful.
It'd be awesome.
And then you know, until next time, we want you to eat some meat, feel better, and whatever you do,
Don't fall
don't fall
down
down the
the
herbivore
carb
hole.
hole.